Good morning. Welcome to Leominster Access Television and an episode of Shadows. Every once in a while we do one of these episodes when we have interesting guests, and today we have a very interesting guest, and it's kind of like right up our alley. Kyle, our executive director, Alan, who's our engineer, and myself, we've all had not so much encounters, but we've all had an interest, and some of us like a vested interest, Kyle a little more than myself, in UFOs, time travel, and we're lucky enough through Susan McNeil Spuler with her upcoming New England UFO conference in Leominster on Friday and Saturday this week to have a special guest, Travis Walton. And how are you, Travis?
Great to join you.
Good to have you here. And being in Leominster, it's a unique town in many ways. I mean, we've come to know ourselves as the pioneer plastic city, but there's also a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of, not occult, but there's a lot of off-centered things that happen here. Some of them real, some of them not real. We've supposedly had Bigfoot sightings, a lot of UFO encounters. Matter of fact, Betty Andreasen had her first encounter 200 yards from where we're sitting right now on a street right across.
Howard Street, right over there. Yeah.
And so good to have you here.
Well, yeah, it's been, what, 41 years? Coming up on 41 years, right?
Now, you were born in 1953.
Yeah, 53.
So you were 22?
I was 22 at the time, yeah. And in some ways, it seems like yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, it's had such an incredibly powerful effect on me, and just totally, set my life on a whole different track that I never expected.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that's different about like your experience and some of the other people who actually don't remember the actual encounter until they're under hypnosis, you had witnesses to it. And when you woke up, you remembered certain things having happened, so you knew something happened.
It's the only case of an alien, quote, abduction, and I'll explain the quote in a minute, but that was reported to law enforcement while the person was still missing. Mm-hmm. And I say abduction in quotes now because I came to question the term abduction, that it was actually perhaps more of an ambulance call than an abduction, that by getting unexpectedly so close to this object that it triggered an accident that never would have happened, and so it sort of put them in the position of actually taking me aboard in order to revive me rather than a planned, quote, abduction.
Right. So I had read a little bit about this where one article actually said that they accidentally killed you and then revived you. It was one article.
Well, that's entirely possible because the crew said that when that energy hit me, that it was so violent that they immediately, all of them believed it had killed me. They were screaming, "He's dead, let's get out of here," Yeah. So that's probably not too far off the mark. Yeah. And had the crew actually stuck around and taken me to the hospital, that's nearly an hour away. It probably would have been fatal, for them to try to get that kind of help.
So you're all about the same age, 20s, early 20s.
Yeah.
And I put myself in that position again. Like I talked to you earlier, we go up to nowhere, backwoods Maine, deer hunting, and we're on these dirt roads that, like you said, they're an hour away from any type of civilization. I mean, when you're out there, if I saw a light in the sky and one of my friends got hit by something, I don't think I'd stick around. I would beeline it out of there as fast as I could until I could
comprehend
what happened.
And the crew got a lot of criticism. They were actually called cowards for having taken off at that point. But I don't hold that against them. Now, there was a little bit of conflicted emotion between me and them on account of them leaving, them assuming that I blame them for what happened, but I don't. It was totally understandable. Mike was the crew boss. He was responsible for the lives of the remaining crew, And you know, why get anybody else killed to save somebody they think's already dead?
Yeah. Now, can you just explain to us a little bit about like a typical day's work as a logger up in the what was the name of the mountains?
Well, it was up on the Mogollon Rim. It's the
Okay.
highest point of land for miles around. You can actually see San Francisco peaks from there, which is the highest point in the state of Arizona.
And could you just give us a little example, like what?
Well, you know, we
we
get out, get out there, and you know, crank up those chainsaws, and we were on at that particular part of the job was doing fuel reduction, where we cut up the trees that we normally would cut down and cut them up into smaller pieces and stack them, so that we've gathered up all of the flammable material in strips through the woods, and placed it in the clearings where it can be burned during the wet season, and there remove all the flammable material and make a sort of a fire break for fighting forest fire.
Yep. Now, since the incident took place, you have been back there. I saw another clip on YouTube where you're actually examining trees and their growth patterns, and a fire had come through and pretty much wiped out what
killed
the
a lot
forest
of the
looked
trees.
like. But there was a period of time after the encounter where the growth rings of the trees were markedly greater than the previous years, and then afterwards there was a time where the growth rate got back to where it was before that 10 years.
Yeah.
Now, would you, like, I was trying to make sense of it. Would that be because of the energy you think that was from whatever
Well,
this
actually,
was?
you know, it's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? You would think that radiation would cause plants to die, but Ben Hansen, the former host of Fact or Fake TV show, supervised the research on these tree rings, and he went online and found out that the trees, the pine trees growing in the vicinity of the Chernobyl nuclear accident had experienced a similar surge in growth. So for some reason, at least in pine trees, radiation causes a thickening of the growth rings.
Okay. And what was that movie, Godzilla?
Could you?
When they were researching, they were finding giant earthworms. And see, a lot of these things, you know, you read all the conspiracy theory, and they say that, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and all these movies that are coming out planned by the black government to desensitize the human race to the fact that aliens really exist, because if they released what they know, that it would cause breakdowns in society, religion.
Well, I think it would. I
do
think
too.
that if it was abruptly announced and made certain in the public mind that there was a superior civilization of that nature, I think it would cause a breakdown of a lot of things. Just in the financial area, the idea that there might be free energy available, that you don't have to pay $2.50 a gallon at the pump. The world economy is based on petrodollars, and that's a threat to that. And there's many other things, you know, the social, political, religious organizations would be disrupted because of the way people interpret this.
Yep.
And I say interpret.
Yeah, you know, going back to my upbringing as a Catholic, having gone to Catholic school, you know, everything was taken pretty much literally.
Yes.
And I'm not sure how they still teach it, but I do know a lot of devout Catholics that, you know, they follow it religiously, and it would just be mind-boggling to them to find out that we're not the only child.
Well, it was originally perceived as something that contradicted certain religious tenets, but my son was dating a Catholic girl, and the priest brought this guy in that pulled her aside and said, you know, you need to get away from this guy. His father's consorting with demons, you know. But it wasn't too long after that, which caused a breakup between the couple, but it wasn't too long after that that the Vatican actually announced that there's no sin, no crime in thinking that there is life out there on other planets.
Yeah.
It's totally consistent with Catholic theology.
Yeah.
And so I've had calls and comments from practically every religion where they will say, I don't believe this, says it contradicts my religion, and just as many who said this fits right in with my religion in this way and this way and this way.
Even if you go into, to read certain things in the Bible, angels, fallen angels. What's the one with the wheel? The wheel that they describe.
Ezekiel.
Ezekiel, and it's actually describing what, with their language of the time, what might be construed as a UFO today. I mean, today we're privy to laser beams. I mean, they didn't know anything about them, so how else would they describe it? I want to go back a little bit. Can we go back in time a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. You guys get done a hard day's work. You want to, let's get the hell out of here. We're going home. And, in the movie, you're depicted as being all tired and everything. I would imagine that there was more of an energy level. You saw this thing and you stopped. And what was the initial feeling that you had when you first saw this thing?
Yeah, well, the movie gave the impression we'd been driving long enough to get drowsy on the way home.
Yeah.
And, we do because it takes an hour to get home. But we hadn't driven far enough. We were still in a pretty aroused state from recent hard physical labor. So everybody was wide awake, kind of excited about the idea that the day was over and we can, get on home and get it done with. So there was quite a bit of chattering going amongst the guys in the truck, separate conversations, but just kind of a bunch of voices going here and there. And I saw these glimmers of light through the trees ahead, and it wasn't anything that made everybody go silent immediately, and I didn't call anybody's attention to it because it was just, at first, kind of an idle curiosity. And I was wondering what that might be up there. I was thinking maybe deer hunters first because it was deer hunting season. We'd been hearing occasional shots in the distance during the day. But that wasn't fitting in with the lay of the land because you could see where the land went, the crest of the ridge, the light was coming from higher than where ground level would be. And all kinds of possibilities came to mind. A crashed airplane, because it's up high. The sunset, the moon, none of that was fitting in. And we had on occasion stopped to put out a fire caused by a lightning strike in the trees on the way to work, because that area of the rim has the second highest frequency of lightning strikes in the continental United States. And so that's where the title to the movie, Fire in the Sky, came from, is that could that be a forest fire up there? But one by one, it caught everybody's attention, and pretty soon we're saying, well, get up there where we can see the source of this light. And it was really shocking when we, came to where we had a direct view of this thing. It was hovering less than 100 feet away, totally unmistakable. Skeptics who said, well, they really saw the planet Jupiter or Air Force helicopters out on maneuver. None of the above fits in the slightest. This was unmistakable. Less than 100 feet away, a metallic object glowing, hovering there in the clearing.
Any noise?
Oh, it was making a very strange mixture of sounds, very, very high frequency. So high it was off the range of human hearing, both on the high end and the low end. And really hard to describe. I once gave a talk to a class of engineering students who were keenly interested in what exactly the sound was like. They were hoping they could get some clue to the propulsion system based on the sound.
And like you said, a high frequency and a low frequency, out of the range of hearing, of human ears. We could only describe what, like I can't hear crickets. Like I can be going for a walk with my wife and my daughter, and they're hearing crickets chirping, and it's like, they're out of my range. I can't hear them for some reason, if it's at the high pitch or
Well,
whatever.
it's a kind of a sound where you turn your head and it sort of changes with, in a strange way. And it's non-directional, it's just,
There.
yeah.
Now, any feeling?
Oh, it made the hair stand up on the back of your neck or on your arms or whatever.
Yeah.
And the guys in the truck said it felt like something was about to happen. Now, whether, that was the sound alone or some sort of electrical situation that was building up in the area of this craft. When I got out of the truck, I'd left the door open, and the crewman next to me, Kenny, was more directly exposed in a straight line to this craft than any of the others. And he's now developed skin cancer on his right forearm.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to be very blunt. Why the hell did you get out of the truck?
Well, I was a very brash, impulsive sort of a person, and I really thought it was going to take off and be gone before I got that close.
Yeah.
So it's something I live to regret, but it was an assumption that was apparently not borne out.
Now, going back to some of the first things we talked about where, your encounter is different in that, when you came to 5 days later, you recall this versus some people who they have nightmares, they have night terrors, and they can't explain it, and under hypnosis, these memories come out. I don't know if is that how Betty Andreasen came to realize that she had been abducted or at least probed up on the street behind us with that bee-type thing that flew around her head.
Did it go up her nose too?
I think it went into her forehead.
Forehead, you're right.
from
Yes.
the stories I read. I mean, you were conscious of it when it happened, and there was a period of time where you don't remember anything.
Well, when I got out of the truck, Alan, he was sitting in the back straight behind me, and Steve, both of them say their impression that it was like I was in some kind of a trance, like I was under outside control. Steve thinks that they were making me get out and go up there, but to me it seemed like my own idea. But he says, well, if they have mind control, they can make you think it's your idea, which granted, but I really do think I was just, thinking it would take off before I got that close, and kind of getting a kick out of how alarmed the rest of the guys were getting when I did so. But
how far did you get from the truck before you?
I was about halfway there when I started. They started really getting pretty anxious. They were actually swearing at me, just like in the movie, to get back in the truck and get out of there. But the closer I got, the scareder I got. So the slower I got. But when I was standing there looking up at about a 45-degree angle, is when it suddenly got louder and started to move. And that startled me enough to make me just sort of impulsively jump for cover. I got down behind a log that was sticking up there, and when I made up my mind, to run back to the truck, I didn't need them to tell me to get away from there. I was already thinking, how am I going to get out of this situation? But when I stood up, that's when this blast of energy hit me. And rather than it being a beam that was fired, I really think that that it was probably caused by me closing the gap between the bottom of that craft and my head, and that this energy jumped through me to ground.
Almost like being a lightning rod for
Yeah,
whatever
like a
energy was
lightning
coming
rod,
out of this thing, and all of a sudden the connection was made. And that's it.
Boom.
Gone. You don't remember a thing
I
after
was
that.
totally unconscious, but it was so violent that they immediately thought I was dead. John said that my body fell like a sack of meat, like there wasn't a bone in my body.
Yeah, now,
But they actually argued about whether I had even been in one piece when I hit the ground. So it was a powerful blast that threw me through the air a good distance.
and when you talk about this, does it bother you? Does it bring back any, I mean, you talk about post-traumatic stress. Some people can't go there. I mean, does it help when you talk about it? Has it taken you a long time to be able to deal with it, or were you able to, like, recognize this right away?
Well, for a long time, every time I would talk about it, it was kind of like reliving it.
Yeah.
And the stress would just leave me drained after recounting those events. But over time, that lessened slightly.
Yeah.
But at one particular point where I decided to connect emotionally in the gut feeling sort of reaction to this, to connect to what I intellectually understood it to mean, rather than the way I was interpreting it
Yeah.
when it happened. So, once I did that, it really, made it a lot easier to talk about. And from
Yeah.
then on, it was a lot less stressful to recount what happened.
Over the years, has that interpretation, like from what you said you thought may have happened to what really did happen, over the years, has that progressed? Have
good point,
has
you know.
anything have you
Yeah.
gotten any more enlightenment from it than you did when you were
Initially,
25 years old?
I felt it to be very threatening.
Yeah.
I totally accepted the term abduction. It was totally terrifying. But putting together all of the clues about what their, quote, agenda might be, what their purpose was, it just wasn't fitting in with any sort of a hostile thing. I mean, if they were indifferent to my welfare, I mean, why was I returned at all?
Yeah.
And the fact that when I first regained consciousness, I felt mortally wounded. I felt I could hardly breathe. Things were seriously wrong inside, and to be returned in good health is just one thing. The fact that I was taken to a spot where I could get help rather than being dumped back where it happened. I would have froze to death if they'd have taken me back there. They could have just dumped me anywhere or just left me laying there like galactic roadkill.
So this could have been a situation of that you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. When you stood up, you got zapped, and all of a sudden they said to themselves, holy hell, we got to fix this. And then you were, wherever you went for those 5 days, was it?
Yeah, 5 days and 6
5
hours.
days. They did what they had to do to get you back in a condition where they could put you somewhere where you could get help on your own.
But see, when the crew took this report to the authorities, they were, they were quite open in saying, he could be dead. And that got the lawmen on the line of thinking that this could have been some kind of a wild cover story for a murder, that I had been killed, and they wanted to make up an excuse for my disappearance. I'm sure somebody could have come up with a better cover story if they'd have done something like that.
Unless it's like
he went over the hill and didn't come back.
Make the lie so big that they'll never believe it.
Maybe a bear got him. Maybe a lion got him.
Bear got you, really.
That would work a lot
absolutely.
better. But so it was the turning point. I think was when they passed the state police lie detector test.
Yeah.
And the president of the American Polygraph Association commented himself on this case, saying that no one test is 100%, but when you have 6 people passing tests on the same issue, the odds would be 1,000,000 to 1 of there being any kind of a mistake in the verdict of the polygraph. And that was with 6 tests. And now there's been 16 past tests. I've passed 5 separate lie detector tests from 3 different examiners of the highest level of credentials, years of law enforcement experience. And that's just the beginning of the evidence, the hard evidence that contradicts the naysayers in their efforts to explain it all away.
Yep. 5 guys or 6 guys total?
Well, there was actually 7 of us all together out there, but when they made the movie, they were trying to cut down the number of characters, and so they reduced the size of the crew. And you know, my 2 brothers, Don and Dwayne, became one character named Dan. James Garner's character actually rolled several law enforcement men and debunkers all into one character.
Artistic license.
Yeah.
So you get 7 guys, all in your 20s, pretty much?
Yeah.
Okay, all, you're doing your logging, hard work. I don't know what you wanted to be when you grew up, but they all probably had different dreams, different roads that they wanted to go in the years, you know, following, I'm a logger, I'm strong enough to do this. How has it changed, number one? How did it change your life and your, you know, future plans, and did it have an effect on everyone else?
Yeah, you know, the rest of the crew, it certainly impacted them in very powerful ways. And some of them, you know, were kind of like in denial. Let's just put some distance between me and this community, and I won't tell anybody about it. And, you know, one of the crewmen had a sort of a personal religious interpretation of events, you know, that he came to regard talking about it as sort of a sacrilege to something that, but, you know, just the accusations and the idea that they were probably under government surveillance, all of those sorts of things, the way it affected prospective employers and whether or not they got the job. You know, that affected all of us, and me more than any of them, of course. And it was really difficult to deal with for a long time. The way the community reacted to me, the way news media would deal with reports. But over time, all that's evolved and changed.
Times are changing. I think people are, like,
Yes.
you know, we talked about earlier where with the movies, Close Encounters was probably the first, desensitizing us to the fact that, you know, it perhaps really does exist. People are more open-minded towards it, more willing to believe a story like this than, you know, years ago. It's like, yeah, they just concocted this. They're completely out of their mind. They're, you know, perpetrating a hoax for their own benefit. I mean, all those thoughts must go through a lot of the people, especially in your hometown's mind.
Yeah.
And as far as, like, you also mentioned government, especially today, our trust in the government isn't what it used to be. Has the government ever, like, questioned you? Has the government questioned them? Is there any involvement from them? Can we go down this road in this talk?
Well, curiously, that kind of interference was direct mostly at the crew. It seems like it was hands off of me personally, and for some strange reason. And I'm not trying to insinuate anything, because to me it seems like I would have been the prime target for the debunkers. He never made a single phone call to me, not a single letter. And this was a guy that would actually get someone who had reported a UFO-related event to make a statement and alter what they said, you know, in order to discredit it. But he didn't even attempt that with me. He attempted it with the crewmen. A barrage of letters and phone calls to Mike Rogers. There was even an attempt by this man to bribe the youngest man on the crew. He was offered $10,000 to deny the truth of this. And the proof that this offer was made was that it was carried to his home by a local law enforcement officer. And so it was impossible for him to deny that the bribe offer had been made.
So it's a pretty good tactic if you think about it. If you get the witnesses to fall away from their story, one conflict with the other,
Yeah.
then it builds a shade of gray, and then the whole thing falls apart. Disinformation. I got a little story here. I talk too much. Tell me to shut up. Susan will. But anyway, years ago, believe it or not, when I went to college, I took a psychology course, and I tell this story a lot. We saw this film, and it was called The Catatonic Rat, okay?
Never heard of it.
And I think it was, when Russia was doing experiments like Pavlov's dogs. It was a psychology experiment where they had a rat in a cage, and they showed it a black card, they showed it a white card. When the white card was shown, it was rewarded with food. So it would run to the white one. But to teach it to go to the white one, if it went to the black card, it would get a shock, okay? So what they kept doing is like making the white closer to black, the black closer to white, until they were both neutral gray cards. So the rat had no idea when it was going to get a shock, they would switch the sides of the color, or when it was going to get rewarded. So only shades of gray. Remember that song? So the rat couldn't discern between, let's say, truth or non-truth. And what ended up happening to it was it freaked out. It just started running in circles, flipped over on its back, and it was still alive, and it was in a catatonic state. And then, the experimenter would move a leg, and it would stay there. Move another, it would stay there. So what I get out of this is they were doing experiments on rats, and let's put us all as rats, people, okay? And if you believe in conspiracy theory, the government wants to control us all. And if you look at what's going on today with the media, where, I could turn on 3 different channels to get 3 different things. What's the truth?
Yeah.
No one knows what the truth is. So we're all running around like these rats.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, we're just going to be catatonic, and we're going to be pliable enough for them to move our arm this way and move our arm, and they'll be in total control. So same thing with the witnesses. If they could, make the truth a shade of gray, then who the hell is going to believe you? Who the hell is going to believe them? Who's going to believe the next person that this happens to? Hope it ain't me. Susan, do you want to get in on the conversation?
Well, you were talking about God and this whole thing. And one of our speakers, Paul Eno, he's going to talk about, at 11 o'clock on Saturday at the conference, UFOs, the paranormal, and God. He was a, when the Greek, he was an Orthodox priest during the 70s. And so he has a very broad religious and philosophical background, very open-minded. And so that was interesting that you were talking about that, and that's going to be one of his topics, because he's found this in his lectures, that people are saying, I have this religion, and my religion tells me this is bad. I'm not supposed to believe in any other life form that's out there besides God. So he's going to address that, and I think it'd be very interesting.
Now, tell us, because we want to talk a little bit about the UFO conference, too.
Sure. We're having our fifth year, the Greater New England UFO Conference, and it's going to be at Leominster City Hall. It's 25 West Street, Leominster, on Friday night, starting at 6 p.m., going until 9 p.m., and all day Saturday, 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. Friday night is Bigfoot night. Nick Redfern is our keynote speaker. We're flying him in from Dallas. He should be arriving any minute now. And so we'll have Nick Redfern. We will have Alexander Petrikov, who does cryptozoology research on Loch Ness monsters, Bigfoot, etc. And then Paul and Ben Eno will also be speaking Friday night. They will be talking about one of their encounters with Bigfoot in Pennsylvania. Then there'll be also a panel discussion, so it'll be very interesting. And then you can get one of these buttons, one of our custom-made buttons. Are we going to focus in on this or not? Anyways, every year we always have custom-made buttons for when you come in, and we have our special artist, Dennis Reno, that makes them for us. Saturday, we have, starting at 8 a.m. to start registration. At 9 o'clock, we have our esteemed guest, Travis Walton. He will speak at 9 a.m. And then at 10 a.m., we will have Carolyn, and I hope I say her name correctly, LaRock. She's going to talk about solar mysteries and UFOs. At 11 o'clock, you'll get to hear Paul and Ben Eno. They'll talk about UFOs, the paranormal, and God. Paul and Ben Eno have their own radio show on WOON in Rhode Island. So that's on every Sunday morning Sunday at noontime. Runs for an hour. At noontime, we'll have lunch, and you can go and see the vendors and visit with all the speakers. At 1 p.m., Mark D'Antonio, who is the chief photo and video analyst for MUFON, he'll be doing that. He has this surprise thing that he does with a roll of toilet paper that's very interesting, that explains the universe, and I can't wait to see it this year. So we'll look forward to Mark D'Antonio. And then at 2 o'clock, our keynote speaker, it will be Nick Redfern, and he will talk about shapeshifters. Shapeshifters is one of his new books that he will be discussing. Now, on tomorrow night, he'll be speaking about women in black as opposed to men in black. So that should be very, very interesting. And after the keynote speaker, there will be a panel discussion with all of the speakers. So people will line them up on the stage, and everyone will be able to get up and ask anyone any question that they'd like. And then if the speakers want to answer, they will do so. And those people will include Nick Redfern, Paul and Ben Eno, Travis Walton, Mike Stevens and Charles Credo from the Seacoast Saucers. They're a support group for people who have been abducted. Mark D'Antonio and Peter Robbins. So Peter Robbins will be joining us. He'll be our MC. So it'll be a very exciting 2-day event, and we're really looking forward to it. So. Shapeshifters.
Now, do you remember Peter Tosser? We used to do the show years ago.
Yes.
Okay. Peter Tosser used to talk about shapeshifters. I don't know if you call them changelings, or reptilians.
Okay.
And Peter's like just one of these guys that's just so smart. And I mean, sometimes he's way out there.
Didn't he have a thing with watermelons? Didn't he have a thing with watermelons?
I can't remember. But anyway, he talked about reptilians, shapeshifters, and how they took on human form. But to maintain their human form, he would go back to, like, I think it's that star Sirius, where they say that they came to Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago, blah, blah, blah. Well, to maintain their human form, I guess some of the research he did, they needed 2 elements, one of which was gold and one of which was blood, okay? Don't ask me, he didn't get into the formula, how it worked.
Okay.
And he talked about how a lot of the Illuminati would, they'd be involved with, sacrificing people over the years, and that was the blood ritual. But then I was thinking, going back to the Catholic upbringing, when we were in school years ago, they used to talk about changing the wine into blood.
The blood of Christ
had to be lined with gold. And then all this light went on in my head where, wait a minute, here's that same shape-shifting, the Son of God, whatever he came down as, to maintain it symbolically, the wine which became blood in the chalice which had to be gold. It was just a weird thought that I had, but that's the way my mind works. I had another question for you, but I completely forgot about it while I was talking way out on that tangent. I remember. Now, you go to these conferences, you're meeting all these people, different people write books. You've written 2 books, I believe?
Well, 3 editions of the same book.
Okay. Have you become a student of ufology, or are you pretty much just
I've picked up a lot by osmosis, by coming to these conferences, and so many people relate their personal experience. And very often people will want me to comment on other cases, other theories, and I really try to stick with what I personally know.
Yep.
I took great exception to people attacking my case when they didn't have the facts. The primary debunker was attacking the case when he thought there were 3 men riding in a car rather than 7 men in a truck. was how poorly vague he was on the facts, and he was already against it. So I wasn't going to commit that wrong and comment favorably or unfavorably on another case unless I had thoroughly investigated it. And I'm still investigating my own case. There's a lot of ongoing research.
Yeah. So you look at it with an open mind, but it's like, how can I make any judgment on something
Well,
that I
one thing
wasn't
I've
part
always
of?
wanted to make clear is that, yes, some of these reports actually do turn out to be weather balloons or meteors or even swamp gas, to
I got
take a
another
funny
story
one.
for you.
But, the debunkers always act like if they can prove any cases or have a prosaic explanation, they therefore disprove them all.
Yeah.
And they go further with the logical fallacy of anything that is failed to be proved is therefore disproven.
Yeah.
And that's just illogical and certainly doesn't hold up to
It fits their agenda.
in science or in court.
I got a story. This is, I don't know if I ever told you this one. When this was about the same time that Fowler had to talk across the street.
Yeah.
So Kyle got me into it, but we used to read all the books on UFOs and everything else, and so I was pretty much into it. And I drove a canteen truck at the time, so my hours were like 3 o'clock in the morning, get home at 2, cook. I mean, I functioned on very little sleep.
Yeah.
And one night I woke up, and there were like blue lights in my bedroom. Like, there was a police car outside with spotlights. And I was like, what the hell's going on? And I lived on Main Street in North Leominster. And I went up to the window in the front of the house, and I'm like, holy. There's a flying saucer on the roof that overhangs my front. It was a big old Victorian house. There's a flying saucer there. I was like, whoa. And the police are out there, and I'm half asleep. So I run in the bedroom. He says, Kathy, my wife, there's a flying saucer on the roof. She goes, you're out of your mind. I said, no, you got to see this. No, it's really there. There's police. She wakes up in the lights. What's going on? She goes out there, and she stands where I was, and she goes, what? You know what it was? We had just had our first kid. We had a diaper.
Swamp gas?
We had a diaper pail. And the top of it was like a dome, and it looked like a... And from standing in that one spot, there was a reflection of the diaper pail on the window, and it looked like... But once I woke up, it was like, how stupid can you be, Jack? You know?
Well, you were
So
asleep.
at that point, my mind played a trick on myself. But
Why were the police out there?
They were emptying a fire hydrant. They were bleeding the fire hydrant right in front of our house.
In the middle of the night?
No, it wasn't in the middle of the night. I'm going to say it was probably, I don't know, 3 o'clock in the morning. They were dumping the fire hydrant. And they had a police car out there, so the water didn't go. And there was a fire, not the fire truck, but the chief's car or whatever the hell it was.
So the moral to this story
I don't know what the moral
is mistakes happen,
Mistakes happen.
misidentifications occur,
Right.
But there's a core reality here.
I agree,
Qualified observers, good solid cases, and that's prospectors spend years looking for gold, and they look at a lot of stuff that turns out not to be gold. But finding fool's gold doesn't prove that gold doesn't exist, and
Right.
that's kind of the logical fallacy that the skeptics exploit. And a lot has changed since 1975. Back at that time, they had something called the Drake equation. It was a formula, a mathematical formula, to calculate the number of civilizations possible in this galaxy. Well, at that time, the numbers that you would plug into that are far, far smaller than they are today, because with direct observation, the NASA has determined that, contrary to what was the thinking was back then, that maybe some stars had planets going around them, they've confirmed that virtually every star has about a dozen planets. And so the numbers you're plugging into that formula are vastly greater than they were back then. So, back then the skeptics would say, well, even if there was life out there, they'd never find us. We'd be like a grain of sand on the other side of the planet. How are you going to find that one? But now with our relatively primitive technology, we've identified not only that there are planets going around them, but which planets are actually likely to be life-supporting just based on being far enough away to be cool enough and close enough to be warm enough, that sort of thing.
And with the Hubble telescope, there's billions upon billions of galaxies, and that's just what we can see with a primitive.
Yeah, a huge proportion of the points of light we see in the night sky are not individual stars, they're entire galaxies. You know, the enormity of just our galaxy, just the huge number of civilizations. And, you know, a physicist, Michio Kaku, was on television last year talking about, you know, people keep imagining that these civilizations would maybe be a few hundred years ahead of us. But a few hundred years going back in our timeline, virtually everything technological that we have is less than 200 years old. So where would these other civilizations become in thousands or millions or even billions of years ahead of us? You know, when our supposedly learned scientists say, well, that's impossible, that's preposterous.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't place limits on where technology is going to go.
And if you think about like the changes that are happening, they're almost increasing at an arithmetic proportion. You know, we went from discovering fire to, you know, how long we actually lived together. It might have taken us 10,000 years, but since, you know, the Wright brothers didn't take that long to get on the moon and splitting the atom, I mean, it's just like right now, it's just happening so fast. It's almost, I think, too fast for the average Joe, you know, to even deal with. I mean, in our job.
Well, back in 1975, they would call us kooks. You know, anybody who believed things that were at odds with the prevailing scientific opinion was a kook. Well, today, with the actual knowledge that we have, those who believe we're alone in the universe, that's a kook.
Yeah.
Just
True. It's true.
think about this.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, I mean, it's like Star Trek,
Right.
science fiction, and it's
I'm trying to remember the book. There was a book that was written, and it wasn't exactly science fiction, but it was about, you know, consciousness and mindfulness and just our whole experiences when we meditate and out of body experiences, and how if you look at time like a clock, from say noontime until midnight, where we were, as you were saying, you know, caveman days all the way up to now, that basically where we are right now in time is, or even say 100 years ago, would have been at 11:57 p.m.
Yeah.
And then every second would be every 10 years, and how it was moving so quickly as opposed to, you know, all day long into nearly midnight, and where time is moving through. And in all of our every minute where there's something new that's being discovered. Where do those come from? I have worked with many, you know, working in MIT Lincoln Lab and the Charles Stock Draper Lab. I've worked with MIT scientists and many brilliant people. And I'll say to them, "How did you get that idea to do that?" And I'd say, "I don't know. It just kind of came to me. I was half asleep, or I was in the shower, and it just kind of came to me. Like it was, I don't know, channeled or something. Somehow it comes,
that's
these
how,
ideas.
like, I think real good ideas and like understanding don't, to me, if I read something, it's like I can read it over and over and over and over again, and all I'm doing is learning by rote. But all of a sudden, when you get something that really you believe in 100%, it comes to you, you understand it, it just happens. And like with your experience, you could get pummeled from every direction with every critic, everyone who says you're crazy or out of your mind. But if it really happens, you know, there's nothing in the world that's going to make you, you know, change your mind.
Look, what happened happened. This really happened. And the evidence is overwhelming if you'll actually look at the evidence. There's been every theory in the world, but when compared with the facts of the case, it just blows these theories out of the water.
Yeah.
Everything's been disproven. You know, are they lying to get out of the logging contract? Well, there's signed affidavits from the contracting officers. No way could it benefit him. No way was anything such thing ever even attempted. You know, are they lying? Are they crazy? Was it a drug hallucination? Hard factual evidence. You know, medical tests prove there wasn't a trace of drug in my body. The hypnotist couldn't have planted these memories. They existed before I was hypnotized. Every sort of a theory to try to explain it away, you know, that he went temporarily insane. Well, a whole battery of psychiatric tests prove I wasn't crazy.
Yeah.
A whole battery of polygraph tests, we weren't lying. And, you know, every single theory that's been offered up to try to explain it away has just been without any foundation whatsoever, just absurd.
Do you think every memory you have of this is there, or do you think, like, as time progresses, you might see
There
other
is
things?
definitely memories that are blocked,
Okay.
and the hypnotist determined that. But getting at those seems to be a hazardous proposition.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
it can't be an easy thing to go through.
Yeah, I mean, Ray Followitz saying that about, you know,
Yeah.
getting him regressed.
Yeah.
It's not always a good thing. You know, let me ask you, Travis, when you were, when your coworkers drove away and left you, when the police went back to look at where you were, what was there? Was there any burn marks?
There was
or-
evidence at the site, not just the changes in the growth of these trees, but one thing that was discovered was high radiation levels. At just the residue on the crew's hard hats, the radiation was 4 times background level. You know, the evidence that radiation may have changed the growth of the trees is one thing. There were high magnetic readings, residual, for a number of days afterwards, taken by researchers on the site. A number of other kinds of things. One connection, you know, I had mentioned earlier that the Mogollon Rim area there had a very high number of lightning strikes. You know, the second highest in the United States, other than the Everglades. Well, if lightning strikes in the Everglades, it's basically going into water.
Right, yeah.
But so there, I was on a show recently called The Lowe Files, and Rob Lowe says, Travis told me that the aliens were in the area mining for fulgurite. And when I saw this show, I was enlightened because I had never heard of fulgurite before.
What is fulgurite?
But, you know, it turns out that it's not a bad theory. The fulgurite is a mineral that's formed when lightning strikes the ground.
Sand, yeah.
And
yeah.
this tremendous millions of volts and high temperatures form combinations out of those minerals that can't be produced geologically. So the idea that aliens might be interested in an unusual mineral of that nature is not a bad theory, but it just turns out I didn't happen to think of it. I'd never heard of fulgurite.
Okay.
But throughout this whole thing, you know, people have gone out of their way to claim a connection to the event in ways that just are invented. One guy was saying, I was at that homecoming party that they have in the movie when Travis was returned. But that was just a story device in the movie. That never actually happened, so I don't know how he could have been there, you know. There's a whole number of things like that. Some guy claiming he worked with me, and every day I would come to work and line my hard hat with tinfoil. And I never worked with this guy. He claimed we worked on a log landing. I never worked on any log landing. So there's a whole lot of people who just wanted to claim a connection. One guy claimed he was the sheriff's nephew, and he was describing how he knew that the crew had met with the sheriff that night at the Red Robin Diner. Well, the Red Robin Diner did not exist until 1995, 20 years later. So there's just a whole lot of false reporting out there that I've had to contend with over the years.
People like to make themselves a part of
Yeah,
something.
glom onto them,
You
yeah.
see it in the movie, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I was there, but
Yeah.
in reality, anyway. I got
Yeah,
one
we
more-
hung out. We were we were high school buddies. Oh yeah, I don't remember you at all.
We didn't even go to the same high school. I got one more question, we got to wrap it up.
Yeah, okay.
We're getting close to an hour. How soon after the event did they start bringing in investigators to look for the radiation?
Oh, that was immediate. You know,
Immediate, okay.
the Geiger counter readings were taken during the search. The high magnetic readings at the site. They even found a polarity reversal in the direction the craft had departed. They brought in the tracking dogs from the local prison, and my trail led from the road to the middle of the clearing where my body had fallen, and that was the end of that story.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of immediate, intense investigation, and come to find out later, government investigation kind of behind the scenes.
So as a lay person thinking back, if there was an immediate investigation that brought in Geiger counters, brought in devices that would measure, polarity reversals, then somebody somewhere in a higher up position
Yeah.
knew that this does happen. So we got to wrap it up.
Okay.
I thought this was a lot of fun.
This was great. Thank you for inviting
Thanks for
us.
coming.
This was
Nice
great.
talking with
Nice
you.
talking to you.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see. Where's the camera? There it is.
There's
Hello.
the
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank you guys again.
Yeah,
Thanks.
sure.
Don't
Hope everyone-
forget the UFO conference
That's
this
right.
weekend.
www.newenglandufo.com. It's $10 Friday night and $25 Saturday, so everyone can afford to come. So we hope to see you there.
Thank you.